Welcome to the Wellness Roundtable, a new podcast created by the Global Wellness Institute. This is Season 1, Longevity, and I'm your host, Alexia Brue, an exited media founder turned longevity entrepreneur. Together, we'll explore the scientific and societal frenzy around all things longevity, examining whether it's a golden age or a gold rush. For our inaugural episode, I am so pleased to welcome scientist, futurist, and investor, Dr. Peter Diamandis to the Wellness Roundtable. Throughout his education at MIT and Harvard, Dr. Diamandis straddled passions for both space exploration and medicine. And these twin passion points have defined his career in founding over 20 companies focused on longevity, space, education, as well as a venture fund called Bull Capital Partners, which invests in longevity and technology. Dr. Diamandis and I discuss how we're in the middle of a healthspan revolution and how technologies are quickly converging to greatly extend both our healthspan and lifespan. He explains the powerful concept of longevity escape velocity and paints a provocative picture of the monumental change coming in the next 5 to 10 years and why we all need to maintain a longevity mindset. Let's dive in. Welcome, Peter, to the Wellness Roundtable. Thanks for making time for this.
A pleasure, Alexia. Good morning.
Good morning. So you've been active in founding companies in the longevity space for close to 20 years. However, for many people, or most people, it feels like longevity has just burst on the scene in the last year or two. Why is longevity suddenly having its main stage moment?
It's a great question. And I think it's definitively the result of the technologies that are enabling us to understand why we age, how to slow it, stop it, perhaps reverse it. You know, we're in the midst of what I call a health span revolution. You know, our first health span revolution, the first, if you would, significant extension of how long and how healthy we live that occurred, you know, during the 20th century was a result of better sanitation, antibiotics, pasteurization, better safety. All those things brought us from an average life expectancy of our late 30s or 40 to almost doubling the human lifespan. And it's fields like AI, single cell sequencing, cellular medicines, a whole set of exponential technologies that are converging right now that hold the promise that we can, in fact, significantly extend both our health span and our lifespan. And so I think that in the next 5 years, we're going to see unprecedented breakthroughs that help us understand fundamentally why do humans age in the first place, and why there are certain species of life on this planet, like the bowhead whale that lives 200 years, the Greenland shark lives 500 years, and why can't we? When I was in medical school and I heard that fact, I said, okay, it's either a hardware problem or a software problem that we're going to have to solve. And I think this is the decade that we have the tools to finally solve those problems.
So there's that thinking that it's more of a software problem than a hardware problem.
Yeah, I mean, we are a collection of 40 human trillion cells that make up you and me. And each of those human cells is running between 1 billion to 10 billion calculations or chemical reactions per second. Mm-hmm. It's impossible for traditional medicine to understand the scope of what's going on at that level. But we finally have the tools to understand that, and that's coming from AI. And there is more capital flowing in, more technology, more researchers going into this field because, I mean, what would an extra 20 or 30 healthy years be worth to anybody? It's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. And so the influx of technology and of capital and of researchers are beginning to sort of bend the expectations and the belief that, in fact, we can make a dent in this limitation of, 80 years or 90 years. Can we increase that by 20%, 50%, 100% indefinitely? We're going to find out.
Mm-hmm. And can you just briefly define health span and lifespan?
Sure.
Because a lot of people think that we're just trying to increase lifespan to have
old people sitting around for longer and not being able
Yeah.
to live fully.
I remember I was on the stage at the Vatican with a panel of scientists that I was running and theologians, and in the audience were 600 medical specialists and theologians there. We were talking about the morality of immortality. And I flipped it and I said, how about the immorality of mortality? During my conversation, I asked the audience, how many of you here would love to live to 120? And like a quarter of the room raised their hands. And I was like, what? I mean, it's like, what are you thinking? And the realization is when people think about living to 120, they think of being decrepit in a wheelchair. And that's not the vision here, right? So lifespan is how long your heart's ticking. Health span is how long do you feel vital? Do you have the cognition, the aesthetics, the mobility to enjoy life? And that's really the goal. So today in the US, lifespan typically runs 78, 79 years. Health span runs 63 years. So we've got the last 16 years of life where you're in pain, you're in bed, you're operating at less than full capacity, and it's not fun. So the question becomes, how do we extend your health span so that at 100, you've got the vitality, the energetics, the aesthetics, the mobility that you had when you were 40 or 50? That's the goal. That's what we should be shooting for.
Yeah, totally. One of the really intriguing concepts that your book introduced me to was longevity escape velocity. And it was kind of mind-blowing. And would love for you to unpack that for the audience.
Yeah, sure. It's a powerful concept. I wish I could take credit for it, but it's really the work of Aubrey de Grey and Ray Kurzweil. So it turns out that science and medicine are working to constantly extend our health span, extend how healthy and long we live. And, during this past decade, putting the disruption from COVID aside, we've been adding about a quarter of a year of life for every year that we're alive. So over the course of 4 years, you'd gain an extra year of life because of the breakthroughs in neurocognitive, cardiovascular, metabolic, all of those areas. Today, science is accelerating these fields, and there is a belief that there's going to be a point in the near future that for every year that you're alive, science is extending your life for more than a year. And that idea, that departure point, is called longevity escape velocity. So in my book, I interview a number of my friends who are researchers and really the leading thinkers in this field, and asked, when do you think we might reach longevity escape velocity? Ray Kurzweil, who's been my mentor, he's considered one of the most brilliant thinkers in AI on the planet, has an 86% accuracy rate in his predictions. Ray's prediction of when we reach LEV, longevity escape velocity, is by the end of the year 2030. So call it by 2031, which is incredibly close, right? If you talk to folks like David Sinclair and George Church, both at Harvard Medical School, their expectation is it's the mid to late 2030s. I just saw Dario, the CEO of Anthropic, on stage at Davos, and he talked about the impact of AI on biology, and he said, AI is likely to enable a century's worth of biological research and progress in the next 5 to 10 years. And if that is the case, what we might expect to see is a doubling of the human lifespan in the next 5 to 10 years. So you put all of this together, and all of a sudden you've got this extraordinarily powerful vision of what might be possible that society, I don't want to say isn't ready for, but isn't speaking to. What happens when we double the human lifespan or increase it by 20 or 30 years, let alone, just by 10 years? So there is monumental change coming, and I think it's to everybody's benefit. I think people, if you have the vitality, the energy, if you feel great, the last thing you want to do is retire. You're going to enjoy life. You're going to, did you want to retire when you were 25 or 30? Probably not. Yeah.
Right. And I think one of the takeaways for consumers is there's going to be this whole unbelievable toolkit coming in the next 5 to 10 years. And so it's really important to stay in good health so that you're here to take advantage of it, right? Today's 50 and 60-year-olds are going to have opportunities to enhance their health that our parents couldn't have dreamed of.
So I think about that. And one of the things I teach is having a longevity mindset. And a longevity mindset means this deep understanding and belief that, in fact, these breakthroughs are coming and that you want to keep yourself in the best health possible to intercept them, right? I'll never forget one of my dearest friends on the planet, a guy named Todd Hawley, passed away from HIV and the AIDS epidemic like a year before the multiviral drugs were available. So you don't want to, cross over before these longevity therapeutics are available. And if that's the case, if you have this longevity mindset, you're going to do what it takes to keep yourself as healthy as you can.
I love your new book for many reasons. What I found, it was a really comprehensive, but not an overwhelming view of the different tactical areas of longevity.
Thank you.
So I think it'd be helpful to just ground everyone in what those different tactical areas are, starting with nutrition and just sharing the longevity framework around when and how to eat.
Yeah, sure. So the book over my shoulder here is called Longevity Guidebook: How to Slow, Stop, and Reverse Aging and Not Die from Something Stupid, which is a fun subtitle. And there's a chapter on nutrition, on exercise, on sleep, on mindset, on meds and supplements, on your annual digital upload and routines. And then there's a whole chapter on women's health in particular, written by two incredible women physicians. So on nutrition, on your longevity diet, first understand you are what you eat. And the second thing is there's no one diet for everybody. But there are some fundamentals that are true across the board. And the first fundamental, which is not easy for most people, is that we consume way too much sugar. When I think about what's healthy for us, I go back to what did we evolve as human beings for? And we evolved on the savannas of Africa 200,000-300,000 years ago. And back then, there was no real sugar. There was no availability of processed sugar for sure. And when we look at how much we eat today, it's insane. We eat on the order of 50 to 60 kilograms. I think it used to be 2 kilograms or 4 kilograms 100 years ago. I minimize the amount of sugar that I take in, high glycemic carbohydrates. Sugar is an inflammatory molecule. It sticks to our proteins. It causes neuroinflammatory, cardiac inflammatory, metabolic conditions, of course. In fact, there was a study we just recently did at Fountain Life, and we looked at what is the number one thing that correlates with heart disease. Is it your triglycerides, your cholesterol levels, your LP little a? No, the number one thing that correlated with heart disease was your hemoglobin A1C, which is your average blood sugar levels.
And maybe just to flag that your average doctor won't really flag your hemoglobin A1C as problematic until you're practically diabetic, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're at like 5.7, 5.8, 5.9, you're pre-diabetic. And then when you get up, towards 6 plus, you're diabetic. My goal is to get my hemoglobin A1C below 5. I'm down to like 5.2 now, and I'll keep lowering it because I want to minimize the impact of sugar on my body. Second area that I talk about in the book is protein. If you could do one thing out of everything in the book, it's build muscle mass. Your muscle is your longevity organ for a number of reasons. And, building muscle. So last year, I set out to add 10 pounds of muscle. And it was not easy, but I did it. I did it by basically consuming enough protein, which is, for me, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I hate to mix measures there, but it was 150 grams of protein a day. The second thing was working out 5 days a week, adding creatine as a supplement. So you need enough protein in your body. And most people don't get enough protein. And so making sure you get enough protein. The next thing is making sure you get enough plant-based nutrients. So I am constantly focusing on eating as much whole plants in my diet as I can.
Okay, so moving to sort of the next tactical domain, fitness. The wellness industry has always said, find something that you love doing, that's exercise, all movement is good, just, move your body. I think the longevity movement is a little bit different in what they're saying about exercise. It's a little more prescriptive. I would love for you to explain that.
Sure. So first of all, yes, movement, the ratio of something to nothing is infinite. So any kind of movement is good. The fact that we're both sitting here on our butts having this conversation slays me. I take, so every one of my normal Zooms or meetings, I'm either on my Techno Gym exercise bike right over there, running it at a heart rate of 105 beats per minute, which is my zone 2 area, or I'm in my sauna over there. I have this healing sauna that my head is above and my body's in the sauna, and I get 30 minutes of sauna. So I'm trying to make double duty constantly because we're living on Zoom. We're living on these video conferences. So on the prescriptive side, I think about exercise falling into 3 or 4 buckets. The first is resistance training. It's intended to build muscle. And I am in the gym. My goal is at least 5 days a week, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't need to be there for hours or an hour. If I can get in and do a solid workout for 40 minutes, I'm super happy with it. And I can always find 40 minutes, but I'm super intentional. I have my workout and I hit it hard for 40 minutes, and then I'm back. I have a scale called an in-body scale that I use that measures my percent body fat, my muscle mass, my total weight, and I'm measuring that all the time. Understand my body composition. So muscle, weightlifting, resistance training is my number one go-to. Number 2 is what's called zone 2 training. And so I talk about this in the book. You can calculate your zone 2 numbers, and mine is 105 beats per minute of a heart rate. So I get on the bike and I will get to a pedaling level of resistance and speed that I maintain 105 beats per minute during the course of an hour-long Zoom. I can still talk at that speed, but I'm just on the edge of being out of breath. And that level heart rate and that level of energy expenditure is giving the signal to my mitochondria to reproduce and to remain healthy. The final is what's called a high intermittent interval training, HIIT training. And this is, again, I do it on my bike here. I will go hard for a minute to the point of exhaustion. And then I will, for a minute, be very slow recovery, and then hard for a minute, recover for a minute. And this is really to get your VO2 max levels as high as possible. And then, of course, there's just plain movement. There's walking. I've got my Apple Watch that I'm monitoring how many steps I do. It's gamified. I'm at 7,000. I got to go someplace and get my last 3,000 steps so I can get to 10. There's no magic number there. I mean, there are different studies that say if you move 5,000 steps or 7,000 steps or 10,000 steps, the goal here is get out there, take your phone call, take a morning walk, get some sunshine. Those are all things, but yeah.
And I think people don't realize that after 40, you're losing 5 to 8% of muscle mass every decade unless you're doing the kinds of intervention that you're talking about. Yeah. And I think that's just sort of coming into mainstream awareness. This need to maintain, even just to maintain muscle mass is a lot of work, much less do the kind of building that you're talking about.
It is, and it's critical. Why is it so critical? Well, one of the things that kills a lot of people in their 70s and 80s is a fall. If you fall and you break your pelvis or your hip, you end up flat on your back in the hospital. A significant number of people will develop a pneumonia because they're not moving, and a significant of those people never recover. And my dad passed from that exact scenario. He got out of bed, he fell, he broke his pelvis. He was in his mid 80s, but ended up in the hospital, developed pneumonia, and that eventually killed him. And your ability to maintain sufficient bone density, and very importantly, your muscle mass that prevents the fall, or even in a fall protects you, is critical.
Yeah. So I think you said this was arguably the most important tool in the toolkit. And I know Dr. Peter Attia says he won't even talk to a patient about supplements until they're working out 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Like it is. Yeah. Quickly, just on sleep, just wanted to get a sense of how the research has evolved in terms of giving people a new framework around duration and type of sleep that they need to live a long life.
Yeah. Sleep is a foundation for longevity. I mean, all of these things are important. And if you don't have a good night's sleep, you're not going to get exercise. You're not going to have your immune system up to snuff. You're not going to be cognitively alert. You're going to be lazier. I mean, you need a good amount of sleep to do everything else that is on your longevity stack. So how much sleep? So, you hear the numbers, 8 hours of sleep. That is the goal. It should be the goal every night. It's my goal every night. My target is a minimum of 7 hours of sleep. Not all sleep is the same. There's deep sleep and there's REM sleep. And I wear an Oura ring. There's also Whoop. There's an eight sleep mattress. All these things measure the phases of your sleep. And you really want to try and get at least an hour of deep sleep, an hour of REM. Deep sleep is where your brain is cleansed from various toxins, various protein tangles and such. And your lymphatic system, which is sort of the lymphatic system for the brain, is clearing the toxins from the brain during your deep sleep. And REM, of course, is where you are forming your memories. And so I measure it and I care about it very much. I have a number of hacks I developed and talk about in the book. There are definitive things you can do to get a great night's sleep. But let me just mention, there are lots of people out there who feel like they can get by on 5 or 6 hours of sleep. I used to think that. I was in medical school. I'd pride myself on, 5.5 hours is all I need. I'll sleep when I'm dead. And of course, not sleeping will kill you.
That's right.
And so, if evolution, think about this, if evolution could have evolved human beings to do, well enough on 6 hours of sleep, that would have been a massive advantage for any subspecies or a subset of the human race that could do that, or 5 hours of sleep or 4 hours of sleep. Because when you're sleeping, you're not reproducing, you're not hunting for food, you're not protecting yourself, you're open to predation. It's a dangerous time. So if evolution could have gotten rid of that, it would have. But it can't. We need sleep for a multitude of functions. I don't think we actually know everything, all the benefits yet. And so for me, I get a great night's sleep by doing a few fundamental things. And literally, I won't trade this against anything. The first thing is I am in bed by 9:30 every night. I have a consistent bedtime. I used to, when I was in medical school and MIT as a graduate student, I would be, in bed at 2 a.m. I was a nighttime person. My chronotype is now completely switched, where my brain wakes up at 5:30 and I'm up. And if I want 8 hours of sleep, that means I'm in bed and, sleeping by 9:30. And that's my MO. I'm getting ready for bed starting at around 8:30. By 9, the lights are low. Might be listening to a book on tape. And my goal is that I'm out at 9:30. I use an eye mask. I love my Manta eye mask that feels incredibly comfortable, and it always provides me 100% darkness.
Okay.
For me, another thing is I get the temperature of the room very low, down to 63 degrees Fahrenheit. The studies have shown that a cold room puts you in a deep sleep much quicker, much deeper. Now, this isn't true for everybody. In particular, women, my understanding from the research, but also speaking to a number of members in my community, that women don't prefer it that cold. It's up to the individual, obviously, but I use an 8-sleep mattress to cool my mattress. I set the temperature down at 63. And then finally, it's making sure that my physiology is ready. I've taken alcohol out of my diet 99.9%. I'll sip a bit of wine once in a while to taste something. I'm not eating after, like I said, I'm eating typically at 4, and hopefully I'm done by 5. So a few hours before sleeping, I'm not eating. There's nothing that's holding down my digestion. I'm not drinking too much water so that I'm not having to get up to urinate in the middle of the night. I haven't had coffee anytime after 12 noon. And all those things contribute to a very solid night's sleep.
And I think those trackers are an amazing way to learn about yourself. I know even if I have a glass or 2 of wine, I see like my HRV goes way down. My quality of sleep is really poor. And so you start to get that feedback loop of what you can and can't get away with personally.
100%.
Yeah. So moving sort of away from lifestyle to more futuristic, maybe less familiar for this audience territory, let's talk diagnostics. So as you alluded to, we're in the midst of this sea change in terms of AI and also the accessibility of diagnostic tools. Can you walk us through what Fountain Life's protocols are? I think, Fountain Life is a great example. Now you have a lot of company in the space as well. I think you guys were super early onto the scene of the tests that you do and maybe even highlight the ones that you think are the most worthwhile.
Sure. So I built Fountain Life. I had built a company a decade ago called HLI, Human Longevity, and then built Fountain Life about 5 years ago, really to optimize it. These are diagnostic and therapeutic centers. We have 4 of them today: Dallas, New York, Orlando, which is our headquarters, in Naples. We're adding this year LA, Houston, and Miami. And then there's a roadmap for adding 25 or so globally. And when Fountain Life is a membership, it's a full year membership. It includes a diagnostic deep dive, and it includes a wraparound medical team. You get a concierge functional medicine doctor and nurse, a dietitian, and a health coach that support you through the year and optimizing yourself. You also get an AI that has all of your data that you can query and talk to and ask about, like, should I eat this? Should I eat that? Should I do this? Should I do that? Based on my medical data, and I can have a conversation with my AI. Huh. Now, which makes it very much more fun. So when you go for a Fountain Life upload, the terminology we use, you go to one of our centers, you spend about 4 hours with us, and we gather about 200 gigabytes of data about you, far more than any human could possibly fathom. So what are we doing? On the imaging side, it's a full body MRI, brain MRI, brain vasculature. There is a coronary CT with an AI overlay called Clearly, not looking for calcified plaque. That's there, that's fine. It's looking for soft plaque, which can break off, evulse in the middle of the night and kill you. We do a low-dose lung CT. We do a DEXA scan, a retinal scan, full skin. We use a special scan for equivalent to mammogram, but it's using ultrasound from QBio that is very comfortable for women. And then we have your full genome, right? All 3.2 billion letters from your mom and dad, your metabolome, your full blood workup, 140 different blood tests, your microbiome, toxin screening. I mean, it is everything knowable about you to answer 2 questions. Number 1, what's going on inside your body right now? Is there something that you should know about? Number 2, what's likely to happen to you in the future? And how do we optimize you to prevent that? Really critically important. Out of our first 5,000 members, the results are pretty staggering. Fully, I think about 3.3% of people who think they're healthy have a cancer they don't know about, right? 3 out of 100 people. About 2.5% have an aneurysm they don't know about. And something on the order of 15% of people have either cardiovascular, musculoskeletal, neurocognitive, metabolic disease that they need to pay immediate attention to. So the reality is our bodies hide disease extremely well. Most of us have no idea what's going on inside our bodies unless we look. And you can look and you want to know. People say, I don't want to know. I say, bullshit. Of course you want to know. You're going to find out eventually. Do you want to find out now when you can do something, or later when it's too late?
I mean, I think most people hear about this and they're like, that sounds incredible, except for the camp that's like, I don't want to know, which I think is a smaller group. But people's big criticism or question is, it's so expensive. Why isn't this part of healthcare? Or when does the cost come down? So what are your thoughts there? Like, are costs going to come down, and will it remain an out-of-pocket service? Or does this become part of healthcare that we can all expect at some point?
Yeah. So let's talk about costs. So today, Fountain Life, our primary service called Apex, which gives you your annual full upload plus quarterly additional testing to look at how these changes are going and follow you. Plus your medical team, right? Your full concierge team of 4 individuals, plus the AI, all of that together is $20K. I used to pay $20K for just a concierge doctor by itself. We do have a product called Core, which is the full upload and a review of your results, but without the full year medical team. And that's about $6,500. So the price comes down very quickly there. Over time, these prices will all demonetize and this service will democratize without question. It happens across all industries. The human component is the most expensive. That will get demonetized by AI. The cost of the next generation of MRIs, CTs, blood tests, all these things are coming down in price. So it will come down over time significantly. And eventually, this stuff will become sort of, how do I put it? It's going to be, built into your home, right? So today, I've got a continuous glucose monitor I'm wearing on my arm. I've got my Oura Ring looking at my sleep, my Apple Watch looking at a number of other elements. But in the future, I'll be wearing a whole set of wearables, insidables, implantables, all the technology. It's measuring as much as can be measured, uploaded to my AI. And it's catching small variations, little bit of perturbations in the data and saying, this indicates perhaps something, let's go get this test. Right. So it's about catching disease earlier and earlier, making it preventative and personalized and predictive.
How many years away from that do you think we are? I think so many people feel like they're swimming in this data from their Oura Ring and from their Apple Watch and, Strava, et cetera. When does it all start to get synthesized for us?
Now, the next year, 2 years. I mean, we will see large scale health AIs that collect everything, and you can say, listen, turn on Health Coach. And it will, based upon your data, tell you, okay, listen, you have an hour on your schedule. I see today, I think you probably, rather than working out, should go do a sauna. I've ordered your lunch and your dinner to make sure we optimize the right levels of proteins and vitamins that you need. You're about to take the elevator. Don't do that. There's stairs right over there. You lazy bastard. Go and take the stairs. And you can turn that off if you want. But if you want a system that is your guardian angel from a health perspective, that is right around the corner.
That's amazing. So, okay, obviously these diagnostics catch a lot of things that we've talked about, but then they can also help you optimize, right, with supplementation and so forth. Can you call out some of the longevity specific supplements that you think are important this audience know about that are particularly promising?
Oh my God,
NAD, so many, right?
there's so many. And I take about 90 pills a day, pack when I wake up, an AM pack, a lunch pack, a PM pack, and a before bedtime pack. In my book, I break out exactly what I take and why. I look at the major causes of aging, and then every one of the supplements and meds I take is mapped against that. Are there certain must-take supplements? It really depends upon your stage of life and your physiology and your biochemistry. There's a detailed chapter on all the meds and supplements I take and why I take them, and what the science and data is. I mean, I wrote the book to be, you can flip it open, read 3 pages and learn something. And it's meant to be, operationally easy to begin. I want to get my sleep a little bit better. I want to get my muscle mass a little bit higher. Okay, read a few pages. Here are some great things to do.
It's a great book, and it's arguably like the best introduction to longevity that I've read. So right now, there's a lot of cutting edge longevity innovations. Like you wrote about stem cells and therapeutic plasma exchange and exosome treatments. Which of these do you think holds the most promise at becoming mainstream and maybe more affordable as well?
And that's hard to say. So let me mention at this point that I'm running this large global competition called the $101 million Healthspan X Prize. We've challenged teams around the world to come up with a therapeutic that you can deliver to a subject, an individual, in under a year. Might be a day that they take it for, or a month they take it for. And that therapeutic should be able to reverse your cognitive aging, your immune aging, and your muscular aging by a minimum of 10 years, a goal of 20 years. And we have over 600 teams who've entered that competition. Incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we will have a winner by 2030, but there are all kinds of different approaches. And so what I love about this is we have crowdsourced from around the world, incredible companies and approaches. So this is all going to become very clear over the course of the next 2 to 5 years. One of the technologies I talk about in the book, delivered by a company called Immunis, and it's fountain is part of the expanded trial. In full disclosure, I'm on this trial, and an investor and an advisor to the company. So just putting all my conflicts out there. Immunis has a product called Immuna that is a stem cell secretome. So stem cells pump out all of these growth factors and messaging, RNAs and exosomes. And Hans Kierstead, the CEO, created a new drug, which is the 440 factors that are secreted by stem cells. And in his phase 2A study done with individuals who had severe osteoarthritis in the knees, such that they couldn't walk, so they were bedridden or chair-ridden. When he gave them this therapeutic, which is an IM injection over the course of 3 months, something incredible happened. Their immune age got 30 years younger. Their inflammatory levels got 50% lower. Their pain reduced by 70%. And they increased their muscle mass by 6%, even without exercise, right? They were bedridden.
Wow. Yeah.
And they increased their 6-minute walk by 150%. All these things, like, that's incredible. So these are the kinds of things I expect will be coming down the road from many different directions. And it's what I'm excited about.
It's awesome. And I guess speaking of talking your own book, it'd be good to touch on Bold for a second, which is a really exciting venture fund you have. Are there any companies you want to call out that might be household names in the next 5 years?
Wow. Well, so Bold is a venture fund that I had the pleasure of co-founding with Timur Butrascali and Max Bricklin back about 8 years ago or so, 8, 9 years ago. And it began focused on all exponential technologies, but in the last, 3 or 4 years, is really focused in on longevity. A new partner, Sergey Young, has helped us really broaden that tremendously. And so Bold and Bold Longevity Growth is almost all into biotech and longevity technologies right now. There's many companies. In silico medicine is one that I love. Alexia Brue. He's based globally in Hong Kong, in Abu Dhabi, and in Boston. That company is using AI to discover new drugs. And, how do we discover drugs in the old days? Well, we would send a team into the Amazon. They'd get on their hands and knees. They'd dig up plants and soil, and they'd bring it back, and they'd find out any bioactive molecules. And then they would see if the molecule did something useful. And they'd run this trial over the course of a decade that would take billions of dollars. And, most of them failed. It was a random walk of chance. And now we can use AI instead, and this is what Alex Zavrankov and his team have done, to use AI to design the perfect molecule that solves this problem. We know the antigen on the cell surface we need to block, and we design a molecule to go in there and block it. And then we build that molecule and mass produce that molecule, and it brings the costs and timeline down by orders of magnitude. So super excited about in silico medicine as one example of those companies. I mentioned Immunis earlier. They're another company out of Bold. There are so many.
That's awesome. So being in the seat, I love to ask every guest on the pod how they balance the pursuit of longevity with a desire to enjoy life and its various indulgences. So going back to your 9:30 bedtime,
yes.
How does that work for you?
That is a great question. You should ask my family how it works for them. Because my kids now who are 13 definitely like staying up later and later, and dad's going to bed. I used to put them to bed. Now they'll put me to bed. A dear friend of mine, Tony Robbins, who's my business partner. He is my collaborator, co-author, co-founder in numerous efforts. We talked about this, and it's not about, work-life balance. It's about work-life integration. So it's about integrating the things that you love into your life. And so when I go to sleep at 9:30, I end up waking up at 5:30, an hour and a half before everybody else is waking up in my life. And that's my time to do my writing. I'm publishing typically a book a year these days. And I put out 2 blogs every week, one on AI and one on longevity. And I love that golden hour in the morning and a chance to work out and do what I need to. It's my time. I'm involved in running 5 companies. I've got 2 13-year-olds. I've got a lot going on. And honestly, my longevity practices are what give me the energy to do what I do. So I have my Abundance Summit every year. I'm 5 days on stage, morning to night, and it's me on stage all the time, and I'm bouncing around. And the energy comes from passion and purpose. And I think ultimately, finding your true purpose in life, whatever that might be, is one of the most important things, because that gives you the emotional energy to keep going and to do extraordinary things.
It's the perfect note to end on, Peter. I want to thank you so much for pulling up a chair to the Wellness Roundtable today. And if people want to find you, where else in terms of your website? Can you share all your handles, all your socials?
Yeah, sure. So I put out a blog twice a week. Go to diamandis.com to get access to that. I have a really fun podcast called Moonshots. I interview moonshot entrepreneurs, the most extraordinary in the world, who are transforming their industries. My handles are at Peter Diamandis on X and on Instagram. And I'm just having a blast, and I hope people will join me on this longevity journey. And it's the most exciting time ever to be alive. I don't want to miss a minute of it. I want to see as much of the future as I can.
That's awesome. Peter, thank you for the amazing work you do. And thanks for joining us today.
A pleasure. Be well.
Now we turn to the Global Wellness Institute's Vice President of Research and Forecasting, Beth McGroarty, for some insight and commentary on what we just learned. Welcome, Beth. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So earlier in this episode, we were talking to Dr. Peter Diamandis, and we've got a big 30,000 foot view of the longevity movement. And I wanted to get your perspective because you see things years before anyone else. When did you start to notice the rise of the longevity movement?
It's a funny question because obviously it's a cliche that the quest for the fountain of youth is as old as human civilization. And I was reading about 19th century scientists who went completely crazy doing biohacking experiments to reverse their aging. I would say the modern movement, you see conferences like RADFest that launched in 2016 that brought together top scientists that are all bent on fighting death. But really, the current longevity movement and mania really went into overdrive in 2023. And I felt that it really took over the health and wellness space that year. That's the year we became bombarded by longevity and healthspan talk. That's the year when pricey longevity clinics became the new business genre. And it really signaled an unprecedented breaking down of the old walls between medicine and wellness. I would say that this high-tech medical invasion has meant a bigger shakeup in wellness in the last couple of years than in the last 15.
Wow. So 2023, what do you think started to happen there that fomented this whole movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think the speed with which longevity has consumed culture and the media surprised me, really astounded me that it was, so quick. But I do think, and this is sort of an in-depth conversation, that when you think about some big long-term forces that are coming together, maybe it's not so surprising. I mean, one, our world is aging as never before. The global 65 plus population is going to double from 2019 to 2050. Baby boomers, who are now 61 to 79, are the very first refuse to age generation, and they're intent on a totally new way of aging with not just more years, but also healthier years. Two, coming out of the pandemic, I think consumers were exhausted by the pre-pandemic wellness market with its zany trends and defiantly unscientific solutions, which I really think reached its goopy apotheosis right before the pandemic. So post-pandemic, there are new desires for more medical wellness and more prevention-focused solutions.
And I think a lot of people in wellness are trying to define the difference between wellness and longevity. I'd love for you to talk us through how you see the different lanes.
That's a good question and a super complex one. Wellness over the last decade or more has become a term that's stretched so thin, so consumerist, so applied to everything that it really lost a lot of its meaning. But I do think, going back, is there two separate lanes here, worlds here? I do think there is a longevity lane. The research into the aging process, again, the billions and billions are being spent on studying things like cellular rejuvenation and repair, reprogramming our genes that control aging. But that's in biotech. And so even while researchers are working away like crazy there's still so much disagreement in the science world about the best ways forward. So it's very early days. We're still stuck at mouse trials. There's no magic pill now. There might never be one. So I think when it comes to real evidence at this moment, there is simply no way to disentangle the core pillars of wellness from longevity. There's no way to have a longevity lane that's separate from the wellness lane. Most new longevity products, whether supplements or hyperbaric oxygen treatments, do a lot of science signaling. But if there are studies, they're small and they're conducted over very short periods. But there's piles of evidence for the pillars of wellness: exercise, healthy food, good sleep, stress reduction, and social connection, that they're associated with healthier and longer lives. So you can't keep longevity over here and wellness over here. But that to me seems more like a marketing problem for longevity companies and not so much a problem for people. People get that.
Does wellness need to redefine
itself more clearly or risks being subsumed by the new longevity movement? Do we need to put the meaning back into wellness?
Well, I think that putting the meaning back into the evidence-based core pillars of wellness with piles of research around them, the ones I talked about, exercise, healthy sleep, social connection. You get so far away from it, but the longevity conversation is putting more focus on those pillars because they're so critical to health span and longevity. So in some ways, maybe it's a correction away from like crazy, zany nonsense wellness back to the fundamentals. Of course, it's not sexy to return to things in a market that's based on trends and constant fashion mechanisms. So I think that's where it's interesting. I mean, I was thinking a lot, you have biohacking and new pods and new therapies and all this stuff that's just being an avalanche. But I was looking last week at Brian Johnson's program for his Don't Die events. And, he's the most extreme of longevity biohackers, right?
Yep.
His program revolved around sleep, exercise, diet, and community. Those are the old school pillars of wellness. He had breath work. He had dancing. So perhaps even the most out there's in the longevity space are returning to what has evidence.
Super interesting. So Beth, Peter was showing us little packets of the 75 or 90 supplements he takes a day. And as we're talking about, the longevity movement is very data-driven. It's very scientific. Do you think that mainstream consumers are ready for this level of self-quantification?
I always think it's more niche, but when I actually look at the most recent surveys, it's not. A recent Parks Associates survey found that basically half of U.S. internet households now actively use health tracking wearables. Another just recent U.S. survey found that more than a quarter of people would methodically track all their lifestyle habits if they knew it would extend their life.
Wow.
But then the healthcare wearable adoption is even higher in other countries, like in India, it's 57%. In China, it's 53%. In the UK, it's 52%. So, you're seeing huge adoption that I wasn't even aware that it was that huge. And obviously, so much more data can be tracked now, glucose levels, HRV. The vaginal microbiome. You can track dozens and dozens of indicators, and people routinely track every single night of their sleep. I think the big issue that's coming, and it was a great article in Fit Insider about this, is, okay, you have this absolute waterfall of data. Adoption is skyrocketing, but they argue that wearables are hitting a dead end because that data never reaches medicine for any action. So there's a few companies that are now focused on what they call health data interoperability platforms, companies like Junction or Empirical Labs, because doctors are demanding simpler data digesting tools. And the barriers between all this data that we collect, strapped on Oura rings, and action is really holding back longevity and better health outcomes. Because what do you do with all this data? It has to be connected back to medicine.
Totally. So I think that's the big question, right? Who are the players that are going to come in, upload all of this data, synthesize it, and then share it with doctors and the consumer or patient around how they should action it?
Yeah. Right now, a doctor could never make sense of this, just bombardment of data that would come from their patients. So yes, simplification, AI, what matters, when is it a problem? I think that stuff is going to get smarter. And wearables won't be just something that you get delight in tracking your own health metrics, but actually something actionable, both for in the wellness world and in the healthcare world.
Beth, super fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the sudden rise of the longevity movement. Thanks for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Wellness Roundtable. This podcast was produced by Emily Roberts and Ali Alkiza of Over Lunch. Music was provided by Mindstream. And a very special thank you to Susie Ellis, Nancy Davis, and the entire Global Wellness Institute team. As we wrap, it's important to remember that while this podcast is filled with valuable insights about the latest longevity science and innovations, it is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Our conversations are designed to inform and inspire, but should not replace the personalized guidance of your healthcare providers. If today's episode sparked your interest, please subscribe to our podcast, leave a review, and share it with friends. To learn more about the Global Wellness Institute, please visit our website, globalwellnessinstitute.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.